Kate Morrison felt strange standing in the huge hall of the Valtheon trade station. She was a lieutenant commander from Earth, and today she had to show Earth's products to aliens from many different planets. The station was floating in space near two suns, and inside the hall there were creatures from 47 different worlds. All around her, the other booths were full of amazing things. The Xanthari people had armor that could change from solid to liquid and back again. The Krell showed off cloth made from actual starlight that could survive heat so strong it would turn metal into gas. The Orpheans had suits made from living material that could fix themselves and keep someone alive in empty space for weeks. Then there was Earth's booth. Kate looked at what they had brought and felt both proud and worried. They had cotton cloth in different types. They had wool blankets. They had leather bags and belts. They had jackets made from denim. On a plastic model, they hung a firefighter's coat. Next to all the glowing and shining alien technology, their booth looked simple and plain. A tall alien walked up to their booth. His name was Crystallis Vex, and he was from the Xanthari people. His body was made of crystal that caught the light and threw it in all directions. He had a machine that changed his sounds into words that Kate could understand. "Commander Morrison," Crystallis said in a smooth voice, "this is what Earth brought to show us. Plant fibers? How old-fashioned." Before Kate could say anything back, more aliens came to look. There was a Quillian named Breeze Whisper who floated in the air like a balloon full of gas. His body wobbled like he was laughing. Two bug-like Verkesh stood nearby making clicking sounds that the translator said were jokes. A huge alien made of rock named Stoneheart looked at their booth like it made him angry. "You must be joking," Breeze Whisper said through his round translator. "These materials would burn up in most places we think are normal. One solar flare would turn them into dust in seconds." Kate felt her jaw get tight, but she kept her voice calm. Danny Wright stood next to her. He was a sergeant who tested materials for the Earth military. His arms were thick and strong from years of breaking things to see how tough they were. He smiled a little. "That's an interesting guess," Kate said quietly. She picked up the firefighter's coat. "Tell me, Ambassador Vex, how hot can your phase shift armor get before it stops working?" "About 4,000 degrees Kelvin," Crystallis said. He sounded proud. "That is much more than your plant materials could handle." "That is good," Kate said. "This firefighter coat was made for human firefighters. The outside is made from something we call Nomex. It's a special type of fiber. The middle layer keeps water out but lets air through. The inside has a material called PBI mixed with Kevlar." She could see the aliens looking at each other. They moved their arms or tentacles or whatever body parts they had in ways that showed they did not believe her. "These are just words," Stoneheart said in a deep voice like rocks falling. "Old names for old materials. This coat," Kate went on, and her voice got harder, "can stand in direct fire that is more than 1200 degrees Celsius. That's about 1473 Kelvin. It can do this for a long time. But more than that, it has been through fires that would melt you." More aliens had come to listen now. Kate saw that some of them in the back were actually interested instead of making fun of them. "You see," Danny added in his rough voice, "this coat belonged to a firefighter named Captain Helen Rodriguez. She wore it into a chemical plant fire that burned for 16 hours. The heat was so strong that steel beams were bending like soft plastic. But she went in anyway because that's what humans do. We run toward the fire, not away from it." The crystal parts of Crystallis Vex seemed to get less bright. Kate had learned this meant he was confused. The jokes and laughing in the crowd had gotten quieter. "I don't believe that," Breeze Whisper said, but he did not sound as sure now. "Plant materials just can't survive such heat. Our computer models clearly show that it's not possible." "Your models," Kate said calmly, "probably don't think about something humans learned a long time ago. It's not just about the material itself. It's about the layers. It's about the engineering. It's about understanding that the best protection often comes from putting simple things together in smart ways." She held up a piece of blue denim cloth. "Some aliens actually moved back a little, like the plain cloth might hurt them somehow." "This is denim," Kate said. "It was first made for miners and workers on Earth. Cotton threads woven in a certain pattern, colored with blue dye. Nothing fancy. But do you know what makes it special?" She waited. Nobody said anything. "It gets stronger when it gets old," Kate explained. "The more you use it, the more damage it takes, the tougher it becomes. The threads get tighter together. The fibers lock into each other. We have denim clothes on Earth that are over 100 years old. They still work. They still protect people. Can your starlight cloth do that?" One of the bug aliens, whose name tag said Chitin Sharp, clicked forward. His many eyes caught the light and threw it back in broken patterns. His voice through the translator sounded more thoughtful than before. Our materials are made to work best in controlled places, Keaton Sharp said. They are very good under certain conditions. Are you saying that human materials are more able to adapt? I'm saying, Danny said, picking up a wool blanket from their table, that humans learned to survive on a planet that was trying to kill us all the time. Very hot places, very cold places, dangerous light from the sun, chemicals that could burn you, things that could hurt you physically. We didn't have safe places with perfect conditions. So we made materials that could handle anything. He held up the wool blanket. It looked silly and old in the bright modern hall. Wool, Danny said, comes from an animal we raised thousands of years ago. It can soak up 30% of its weight in water without feeling wet. It naturally fights against fire. It can keep you warm even when it's soaking wet. It breathes, it keeps heat in, and it lasts for many years. Our grandparents crossed frozen mountains and burning deserts wearing this stuff. Stoneheart, the huge rock alien, moved forward. His people were known for being good at building things and being proud of their metal technology. A test, Stoneheart said in his flat voice. Words mean nothing, human. If your old fabrics are so good, prove it. This place has testing rooms. Let us put your materials through real tests and see how they compare to better technology. Kate and Danny looked at each other. This was exactly what they wanted, even though they thought they would have to ask for it first. Kate turned to look directly at Stoneheart. We accept, Kate said. Tell us what tests you want to do. A wave of interest moved through the crowd. The crystal parts of Crystallis Vex started to shine with what Kate knew meant excitement. The standard tests, Vex said. Heat stress.
Chemical damage.
Physical hits, radiation. Ability to work in different places. Each species can give one piece of material. We test them all the same way. Everyone will see the results, agreed, Kate said. But I have one rule, the crowd made noises. It seemed like humans asking for rules was strange to them. When our materials do better than yours, Kate said in a calm voice. And they will. I want you to listen to what I say about them. Really listen. Because this isn't just about proving that Earth's materials are good. It's about showing you that sometimes the simplest answers, the ones that look old to you, are simple because we spent thousands of years making them better. They're simple because we made them that way on purpose. The crystal parts of Crystallis Vex seemed to get less bright. This meant he was confused or thinking hard about what he believed. The crowd had stopped making jokes. I find that hard to believe, Breeze Whisper said. His voice did not sound as mean as before, though. Plant materials just can't handle such extreme heat. Our computer models clearly show that they can't. Your models, Kate said gently but firmly, probably don't think about something humans figured out a very long time ago. It's not just about the material. It's about the layers. It's about the way we put things together. It's about understanding that the best protection often comes from combining simple things in smart ways. She held up a simple piece of denim cloth. Several aliens actually moved backward a little, as if the plain blue cloth might somehow hurt their fancy materials. This is denim, Kate said. It was first made for miners and workers on Earth. Cotton threads woven in a special pattern treated with blue dye. Nothing fancy. But do you know what makes it special? She waited. No one answered. It gets stronger as it gets older, Kate explained. The more you use it, the more damage it takes, the tougher it becomes. The way it's woven gets tighter. The fibers lock together more. We have denim clothes on Earth that are over 100 years old. They still work. They still protect. Can your starlight cloth say the same? One of the bug aliens, whose name was Chitin Sharp, clicked forward on his many legs. His big eyes reflected the lights in broken patterns. Through the translator, his voice sounded more serious now. Our materials are designed to work perfectly in controlled places, Chitin Sharp said. They do very well under specific conditions. Are you suggesting that human materials are more able to change and adapt? I'm suggesting, Danny said as he picked up a wool blanket from their display, that humans learned to survive on a planet that was actively trying to kill us. Very hot weather, very cold weather, dangerous radiation from the sun, chemicals that could burn skin, physical injuries. We didn't have the luxury of safe, controlled places, so we made materials that could handle anything and everything. He held up the wool blanket. It looked strange and old-fashioned in the shining exhibition hall. Wool, Danny continued, comes from an animal we learned to raise thousands of years ago. It can absorb up to 30% of its weight in water without feeling wet to touch. It naturally resists fire. It can keep you warm even when it's completely soaked through with water. It lets air through, it keeps heat inside when you need it, and it lasts for many decades. Our ancestors crossed frozen mountains and burning hot deserts wrapped in this stuff. Stoneheart, the massive alien made of rock, moved forward. His people were famous for being good engineers and for being very proud of their advanced metal technology. A demonstration, Stoneheart said in his flat, deep voice. Words are cheap, human. If your old fabrics are so remarkable, prove it. This exhibition has testing rooms. Let us put your materials through real stress and see how they compare to superior technology. Kate and Danny looked at each other quickly. This was exactly what they had been hoping would happen, though they expected to be the ones to suggest it. Kate turned to face Stoneheart directly. We accept, Kate said clearly. Name your tests. A wave of interest moved through the crowd. The crystal body of Crystallis Vex began to shine brighter. Kate had learned this meant he was excited or looking forward to something. The standard battery of tests, Vex said. Thermal stress, chemical exposure, physical impact, radiation resistance, environmental adaptability. Each species may submit one material sample. We will test them all under exactly the same conditions. The results will be shown publicly to everyone, agreed, Kate said. But I have one condition. The crowd made surprised sounds. Apparently humans asking for conditions was unexpected and unusual. When our materials perform better than yours, Kate said calmly, and they will, I want you to listen to what I have to say about them. Really listen. Not just pretend to listen. Because this isn't just about proving that Earth's materials are good. It's about showing you that sometimes the simplest solutions, the ones that look primitive and old-fashioned to you, are simple because we spent thousands of years making them perfect. They're simple because we made them that way, on purpose, deliberately. Stoneheart was quiet for a moment. Then he made a sound like rocks grinding together, which the translator said meant agreement. Very well, human. When you lose, perhaps you will learn humility. And if by some impossible chance you win, we will listen to your words. The crowd began to break up, but many aliens stayed to register their materials for the test. Kate watched as species after species submitted samples of their finest protective materials. Each one looked more advanced than the last. The Xanthari submitted a square of their phase-shift armor that seemed to exist in multiple states at once. The Krell brought their starlight cloth that glowed with inner light. The Orpheans provided their biosynthetic material that appeared to breathe like living skin. There were crystalline weaves that sparkled like diamonds. There were metallic fabrics that the makers claimed could repair themselves. There was even a piece of living armor from the mysterious void dwellers that seemed to move on its own. When it was Earth's turn, Kate carefully placed her sample on the registration table. It was a layered composite. On the outside there was Nomex, the material used in firefighter coats. Below that was Kevlar, the material used in bulletproof vests. Then there was treated cotton canvas. At the base was leather. All of it was assembled in the same way that advanced safety equipment was made on Earth. Next to the glowing, shimmering, moving samples from other worlds, Kate's composite looked plain. It looked boring. It looked like something from a museum. Several aliens looked at it and made sounds that clearly meant they thought Earth had already lost. Danny leaned close to Kate and spoke quietly. They have no idea what's about to happen, do they? Kate smiled just a little. Not even a clue, she whispered back. The testing was scheduled to begin in 2 hours. Kate and Danny went back to their booth to prepare. They knew their material would perform well, but they also knew they needed to be ready to explain why. The aliens wouldn't just want to see results. They would want to understand how it was possible. As they organized their notes and data, other humans from Earth's delegation stopped by. There was Linda Hayes, a materials engineer who had helped design the composite. There was Greg Cooper, a chemist who specialized in protective coatings. There was Patricia Mills, a former firefighter who had worn similar gear in actual emergencies. You really think we can win this? Linda asked. She sounded nervous. Some of that alien tech looks like magic. Danny shook his head. It's not magic. It's just specialized. They designed their materials to be perfect for specific situations. We designed ours to survive anything. There's a big difference, Patricia nodded in agreement. I wore gear like this into fires that would have killed me in seconds without it. I've seen it save lives over and over. It works because it has to work. Because if it doesn't, people die. That kind of necessity breeds reliability. Greg added his own thoughts. The aliens have amazing technology, but they also have safe worlds with controlled environments. They never had to develop materials that could handle extreme and unpredictable conditions. Earth did. That's our advantage. Kate listened to her team and felt confident. They were right. Earth's materials weren't just good in theory. They were proven in practice. They had saved lives. They had been through real disasters and real emergencies. They had been refined through actual use, not just computer simulations. As the time for testing approached, more and more aliens gathered near the testing facility. Word had spread through the station. Everyone wanted to see if the primitive humans could possibly compete with advanced galactic technology. Some came to watch Earth fail. Others came out of genuine curiosity. A few came hoping to be surprised. Kate and Danny made their way to the observation gallery. The room was already packed with representatives from dozens of species. The air was filled with various sounds as aliens talked to each other in their own languages. Translation devices buzzed and hummed as they converted all the different voices into understandable words. The testing chamber was visible through thick, transparent walls. Inside, robotic arms were arranging the material samples on special platforms. Sensors surrounded each sample, ready to measure and record every detail of their performance. At the center of the observation gallery, a being of pure golden light floated in the air. This was an Archon, a member of an ancient species known throughout the galaxy for being fair and impartial. The Archons were often chosen to judge competitions and settle disputes because no one could bribe them or influence them. The Archon's voice seemed to come from everywhere at once. It did not need a translator. It spoke in a way that all species could understand directly in their minds. "Welcome to the material performance trials," the Archon said. 15 species have submitted samples. Each will be tested under identical conditions. The test will measure thermal resistance, chemical tolerance, physical durability, radiation shielding, and environmental adaptability. All data will be displayed in real time. All results will be public. Let us begin. The testing room on Valtheon Station was impressive, even by the standards of advanced galactic technology. There were sealed chambers that could create any environment imaginable. They could make the crushing pressure of a gas giant planet or the near emptiness of deep space. They could make the terrible heat of a star's surface or the bone-breaking cold between the stars. Kate and Danny stood in the observation gallery with representatives from 15 different species. Each species had brought their best protective materials. The gallery's strong, transparent walls let them see clearly into the testing chambers below. Kate had submitted a layered sample. It had Nomex on the outside, then Kevlar, then treated cotton canvas, then leather at the base. It was put together the same way that advanced firefighting and industrial safety equipment was made on Earth. Next to the samples from other species, it looked plain and simple and almost laughable. The Zenthari had provided a sheet of their famous phase shift armor. It seemed to shimmer and change between different states of matter. The Krell submitted their starlight fabric that glowed from the inside. The Orpheans offered their biosynthetic material that actually seemed to breathe like living tissue. There were samples of crystalline weaves. There were metallic fabrics that claimed to fix themselves when damaged. There was even a section of living armor from the mysterious Void Dwellers. The Archon floated at the center of the gallery. Its form was hard to look at directly. It appeared as a shape of golden light that was somewhat like a person but not quite. The first test, the Archon announced in its voice that seemed to come from everywhere, will measure thermal stress. Each sample will be exposed to increasing temperatures. We will start at 500 degrees Kelvin and go up to 5,000 degrees Kelvin. We will increase by 500 degrees at a time. Each sample will stay at each temperature level for 10 standard minutes. The samples were arranged on special platforms that could resist heat. Sensor arrays surrounded each sample. The sensors fed information to holographic displays that appeared in front of each species representative. As the temperature started to climb, Kate watched the readings carefully. At 1,000 Kelvin, some of the more exotic materials began to show problems. A fabric from the bug-like chur species started to turn from solid directly into gas without becoming liquid first. At 1,500 Kelvin, the Zenthari phase shift armor began to change in wrong ways. It could not maintain its special quantum state under the heat. Crystallis Vex made a sound like wind chimes in a storm. The translator said this meant he was upset and worried. The Krell starlight fabric held together until the temperature reached 2000 Kelvin. Then it suddenly flared with bright light and fell apart. It could not contain the heat energy it was designed to absorb. By 2500 Kelvin, only 3 samples were still whole. There was a metallic weave from the Dravix. There was the Orphean biosynthetic material, and there was Kate's layered composite from Earth. The gallery had become very quiet. At 3000 Kelvin, the Dravix metallic weave began to glow red, then orange, then white. Its molecular bonds were under too much stress. Stoneheart's rocky face showed no expression, but Kate noticed small pieces of stone falling from his shoulders. This was a sign of stress in his species. The Orphean biosynthetic material was having trouble too. Its cellular structure was designed to adapt and survive, but it was adapting too slowly for this much heat. At 3500 Kelvin, it began to burn and crack. Kate's composite was showing damage now. The outer layer of treated canvas was turning black. The leather had cracked and split. But beneath those outer layers that were meant to be sacrificed, the Nomex and Kevlar core remained whole. The aramid fibers were designed specifically to withstand these temperatures. The weave was holding together. At 4000 Kelvin, the Dravix metallic weave failed completely. The alloy reached its melting point. The metal turned into liquid and pooled on the platform, glowing white-hot like a small sun. The temperature climbed to 4500 Kelvin. Kate's composite was the only sample still maintaining its structure. The outer layers were gone, burned away as they were designed to do, but the core was holding. The sensor data showed the inner layers were still below their failure temperature. At 5000 Kelvin, the Archon called a stop to the test. Kate's sample had survived the full range. The gallery erupted in noise. Each species made their own sounds of surprise. The crystal facets of Crystallis Vex were flashing rapidly in patterns Kate had never seen before. Breeze Whisper was bobbing up and down in his floating way that meant he was agitated. Even Stoneheart looked shaken, which was hard to tell on a face made of rock. "That is only one test," Stoneheart said in his rumbling voice. "There are 4 more tests remaining." "Indeed," the Archon said. "The next test will measure chemical exposure tolerance." Danny leaned close to Kate and spoke quietly so only she could hear. "They have no idea what industrial safety standards on Earth look like, do they?" Kate allowed herself a small smile. "Not a clue," she whispered back. Fresh samples were brought out and placed in sealed chambers. The Archon explained that the chemical exposure test would be harsh. It would challenge materials in ways most species never had to consider, because most species had the luxury of controlled environments and predictable atmospheres. The first wave of chemicals was strong acids: sulfuric acid, hydrochloric acid, nitric acid. These were the kind of dangerous substances that could eat through unprepared materials in just seconds. The Orphean biosynthetic material tried to adapt to the threat. It tried to evolve resistance on the spot. It managed to survive for about 47 seconds before the acids were too much for it. The material basically digested itself, trying to change fast enough. The Xanthari phase shift armor did even worse. The acids disrupted its quantum state almost right away. It collapsed into a corroded solid that dissolved within a few minutes. Kate's sample had been treated with chemical-resistant coatings that were developed for Earth's most dangerous industrial environments. It showed some surface damage where the acid touched it, but it remained whole and functional. The tight weave of the aramid fibers prevented the acid from going deep. The layered construction meant that even if the outer layer failed, there were backup layers below. The second wave hit the samples. These were bases instead of acids: sodium hydroxide, potassium hydroxide. Then came organic solvents. Then came oxidizers. With each new chemical attack, more alien materials failed and fell apart. A crystalline fabric from a species that breathed methane simply dissolved in the organic solvents. A living metal from the Void Dwellers oxidized so fast it actually caught fire and burned. The supposedly indestructible force-woven material from the Pinnacle Collective fell apart when exposed to a simple petroleum product. Only the Dravix metallic weave kept pace with Earth's sample, though it too showed significant damage and wear. Stoneheart's expression had changed from confident disdain to something that looked more like grudging respect. The physical impact test came next. The testing chamber became like a battlefield. High-speed projectiles were fired at the samples. Sharp implements stabbed them. Compression forces crushed them. Tensile stress pulled them apart. Robotic arms struck, stabbed, crushed, and pulled the material samples in precisely measured ways. This was where Kevlar showed why it was originally designed to stop bullets. The aramid fibers caught the projectiles and spread the impact force across the whole weave. When stabbed, the material resisted being penetrated. When compressed, it kept its structure. When pulled, the fibers held together. The Dravix's metallic weave performed well here too. Its advanced alloys distributed impact forces effectively, but while the metal bent and held, it also deformed permanently. It stayed bent and dented. Kate's sample returned to its original shape after each impact. "Impossible," Crystallis Vex said. His resonating voice carried his disbelief through the gallery. "How can plant fibers and animal products outperform our engineered materials?" Danny spoke up from where he stood in the observation gallery. "Because we tested them in worse conditions than this. Do you know what Earth firefighters face? Buildings that collapse. Explosive backdrafts when fire suddenly gets oxygen. Chemical reactions that create poison gas. Temperatures that can turn sand into glass. And they walk into that environment every single day, trusting their gear to keep them alive. We don't make materials that might work. We make materials that must work because if they don't work, people die." The radiation test came forth. The samples were bombarded with gamma rays, X-rays, and high-energy particles. This was the kind of radiation that existed near active stars in deep space, or after certain kinds of weapons were used. Several samples that had survived the previous tests failed here. Materials designed for specific purposes proved vulnerable when their molecular bonds were hit with high-energy particles. Complex structures broke down into simpler, weaker arrangements, but the beauty of simple organic polymers, Kate knew, was that there was not much to break down. The aramid chains in Nomex and Kevlar were already among the most stable organic structures humans had ever created. The radiation did damage them, but slowly, far more slowly than the complex engineered materials around them. By the time the radiation test ended, only Earth's sample and the Dravix's metallic weave remained truly viable, though both showed wear and damage. The final test measured environmental adaptability. The observation gallery had filled up considerably since the tests began. Word had spread through the entire station. Now representatives from nearly every species at the exposition had gathered to see the results. The air seemed to hum with tension as everyone waited. The Archon floated at the center of the gallery. Its form pulsed with what might have been deep thought. The holographic displays showed the final results in clear detail that could not be denied. Earth's material had performed better than every other sample across every single category. "The results are conclusive," the Archon announced to everyone. The Earth sample demonstrated superior performance in thermal stress resistance, chemical exposure tolerance, physical impact resistance, radiation shielding, and environmental adaptability. This outcome was unexpected by all measures. Kate stepped forward. She felt the weight of dozens of alien gazes on her. Some looked hostile. Some looked confused. But many looked simply curious. She had promised herself that if this moment came, she would not brag or make the aliens feel bad. Humanity had nothing to prove beyond what the tests had already shown. "May I address the assembly?" Kate asked the Archon politely. The being of golden light gestured with something like an arm. A platform extended from the gallery floor and lifted Kate up so all could see her clearly. "When Danny and I arrived here," Kate began in a steady voice, "many of you looked at our materials and saw primitives, simple plant fibers and animal products. Nothing compared to your phase shift armors, your crystallized starlight, your self-healing biosynthetics, and I understand why you thought that way." She paused and looked around the gallery at all the different species. "Your materials are impressive, truly. They represent incredible achievements in materials science, quantum engineering, and biological manipulation, but they were all designed for specific purposes. They were optimized for particular conditions. They excel in their intended environments." The crystal facets of Crystallis Vex flickered with light. "Then what is your point, Commander? That our specialized materials are inferior?" "No," Kate said firmly. "My point is that Earth did not have the luxury of specialization. Our planet is a death trap. We have deserts that can cook you alive during the day and freeze you solid at night. We have oceans that will drown you, corrode your skin, or poison you with their inhabitants. We have forests filled with things that want to eat you, sting you, or infect you with diseases. We have volcanoes that explode without warning. We have earthquakes that split the ground open. We have hurricanes that tear buildings apart. We have had ice ages that covered continents. We have had mass extinctions that killed most living things. She held up a small piece of the tested material. It was charred and worn, but still intact. Humans survived all of that before we even learned how to work with metal. We did it with plant fibers, with wool and leather and plant materials. We learned to take simple things and work them in ways that could handle anything our nightmare planet threw at us. And when we developed advanced materials like aramid fibers, we built them using the same philosophy. They had to work in any condition, because we never knew what condition we would face next. Stoneheart moved forward. His massive form cast shadows across the gallery. You speak of survival, but we have survived too. Every species here has overcome challenges. Of course you have, Kate agreed quickly. But most of you evolved in more stable environments, worlds with consistent climates and predictable conditions. Or you developed technology early enough to control your environment before it could kill you. Humans did not have that choice. We had to adapt to extremes or die, so we made materials that could adapt with us. A new voice spoke up from the back of the gallery. It belonged to a representative of the Luminary. This was an ancient species known throughout the galaxy for their wisdom and long-term thinking. I begin to understand, the Luminary said. Its body pulsed with thoughtful bioluminescent patterns. Your materials are simple not because you lack sophistication, but because you refine them through thousands of years of necessity. Each fiber, each weave pattern, each treatment represents many generations of humans learning what works and what does not in life or death situations. Exactly, Danny said as he stepped up beside Kate. That firefighter coat I mentioned earlier, the one that belonged to Captain Helen Rodriguez. She wore it into fires that would have melted most of the materials in this station. And she walked back out alive every single time, because thousands of firefighters before her had tested and improved every single component of that coat. The outer shell, the moisture barrier, the thermal liner, even the stitching that holds it together, all of it refined through actual use in the worst conditions imaginable. Breeze whisper bobbed in the air in what might have been acknowledgement. But surely your materials have limitations. Our computer models show that in certain exotic conditions they would fail. They do have limitations, Kate said honestly. We are not claiming these materials are perfect for every situation that exists. In a plasma storm or at the event horizon of a black hole, they would fail just like anything else. But for the vast majority of environments that intelligent beings actually work and live in, from industrial accidents to ship fires to planetary disasters, they perform better than materials that cost 1,000 times more to produce. She looked around the gallery again, meeting as many eyes as the various species' anatomies allowed. That is what I wanted you to understand, Kate said clearly. When you laughed at our simple cloth, you were laughing at the accumulated wisdom of a species that spent most of its existence one disaster away from extinction. This cloth has been through fires that would melt you, literally and truly. It has been soaked in chemicals that would dissolve your armor like sugar in water. It has been hit by flying debris, exposed to deadly radiation, frozen solid, scorched black, compressed flat, and torn apart. And it is still here. It still works. The gallery was quiet for a long moment. Then Stoneheart stepped forward. His rocky face somehow conveyed respect despite being made of stone and having no flexibility. The Dravix Collective acknowledges the superiority of Earth's materials in these tests, he said in a formal tone. We also acknowledge that we underestimated the value of simplicity refined through adversity. I request permission to study your manufacturing processes and learn from your methods. The crystal facets of Crystallis Vex pulsed in a pattern Kate had learned to recognize as embarrassment. The Zintheri Dominion also requests access to your materials research, and we apologize for our initial dismissiveness and mockery. One by one, species representatives stepped forward with similar requests and acknowledgments. Even Breeze Whisper bobbed apologetically and asked if the Quillian Collective might license some of Earth's fabric, technologies for their own use. Kate looked at Danny. He grinned and shrugged his shoulders. Earth is happy to share our knowledge, Kate said to everyone. But we ask something in return. When you look at other species and their technologies, do not assume that simple means primitive. Sometimes simple means refined. Sometimes it means tested over and over until it is perfect. Sometimes it means that someone spent 10,000 years figuring out the absolute best way to solve a problem. And the answer they found was elegant in its directness and simplicity. The Archon pulsed with what might have been approval. A wise lesson for all to learn. Perhaps that is humanity's true contribution to the galactic community. Not just durable materials, but a reminder that complexity is not always superior to simplicity, and that the longest road to a solution may yield the most reliable results. As the gallery began to empty, species representatives approached Kate and Danny to discuss trade agreements and technology exchanges. Kate found herself holding that piece of worn, tested fabric. It had started the day as a demonstration of human stubbornness and refusal to give up. It was ending the day as something more important. It was proof that humanity's hard-won survival lessons had value far beyond Earth's atmosphere. Danny chuckled beside her. Think they learned their lesson about judging books by their covers? Kate smiled. Some of them did. The smart ones. The rest will learn eventually. Humanity has a way of surprising people when they least expect it. That we do, Danny agreed. That we certainly do. Over the next few hours, Kate and Danny met with representatives from dozens of species. Everyone wanted to know more about Earth's materials. They asked detailed questions about manufacturing processes, chemical treatments, weaving techniques, and testing standards. The Xanthari wanted to incorporate aramid fiber backing into their phase shift armor. The Krell were interested in creating hybrid materials that combined their starlight weaves with cotton-based foundations. The Orpheans asked about adapting their biosynthetic materials to include some of the layered protection concepts that Earth used. Most surprising was Stoneheart. The massive Dravix pulled Kate aside privately. His people were known for their pride and their reluctance to admit when others had better solutions. Commander Morrison, Stoneheart said quietly, the Dravix Collective operates deep-core mining operations on several high-temperature worlds. Our traditional metallic solutions are reaching their limits. The conditions are too extreme even for our best alloys. Would Earth consider designing protective? 6 months passed after the Valtheon exposition. Kate Morrison received a message from the Archon Council. They had been watching what happened after the materials demonstration. They wanted to share their findings with her. 17 species had begun using human fabric technologies in their safety equipment. The Xanthari Dominion had redesigned their phase shift armor to include aramid fiber backing layers for added protection. The Krell were trying out new hybrid materials that combined their starlight weaves with cotton-based foundations for better durability. Most surprising of all, the Dravix Collective had hired Earth to design protective equipment for their deep-core mining operations. These mines had extreme heat and chemical exposure that made their traditional metallic solutions fail. The contract was worth more money than the entire economic output of some Earth nations. But the real measure of success came from somewhere unexpected. A small research station on the frontier had sent a message meant specifically for Kate. They were studying a dangerous planet with conditions similar to early Earth. Temperature extremes, corrosive atmosphere, unpredictable weather patterns. The research team included many different species working together, but they were all wearing protective equipment based on human designs. Not because it was the most technologically advanced option they could get, but because after reviewing the test results from Valtheon, they trusted it more than anything else to keep them alive. Kate kept that message on her desk, next to a small piece of fabric from the original test sample. It reminded her of something important. Humanity's greatest export to the galaxy might not be advanced technology or military power. It might simply be the stubborn refusal to accept that survival was impossible, and the practical wisdom that came from thousands of years of surviving anyway. On Earth, textile workers and material scientists found themselves suddenly needed across the galaxy. Universities that had thought fiber science was a dying field saw huge increases in student enrollment. Ancient techniques for working with wool, cotton, and leather were being rediscovered and studied with the same intensity as quantum physics. Captain Helen Rodriguez was the firefighter whose coat had started everything. She was invited to speak at the Galactic Safety Council. She stood before representatives of 47 species and told them stories about running into burning buildings, stories about trusting your equipment when your life depends on it. Stories about the importance of gear that can take a beating and keep protecting you. When she finished speaking, the assembly gave her the Galactic Commendation for service to sapient safety. She was the first human to receive it. She accepted the award with the same quiet competence she brought to fighting fires. Then she went home to Earth and back to her fire station, because that was what humans did. They did their job without needing praise or recognition. Danny Wright retired from materials testing. He started a consulting company that helped alien species design equipment for dangerous environments. His first major contract was redesigning the environmental suits for the Quillian Collective's gas giant research stations. His design used layered fabric construction instead of their traditional force fields. It weighed less, it cost less, and most importantly, it did not fail completely if the power went out. Kate Morrison continued her work as a person who helped Earth and the galactic community work together. But she never forgot the lesson of the exposition. Whenever she saw new alien technology, she made a point of asking not just what it could do, but how it had been tested. What had it survived? What had it failed to survive? What had the designers learned from those failures? Sometimes she still met species who looked at human materials and saw only primitive simplicity. But more often now, she met species who understood something important. They understood that simplicity could be sophisticated, that organic could be engineered with great care, that the materials that looked least impressive might have the most impressive history behind them. When new species joined the galactic community, when fresh civilizations took their first careful steps into the wider universe, they often heard a story about a space station and a trade exposition, a story about materials that looked primitive but were not, a story about humans who ran toward fires instead of away from them. They heard about simple cloth that had been through fires that would melt you, and they learned to think twice before judging humanity by appearances. The impact of that one day at Valtheon Station spread far beyond what Kate or Danny had imagined. Trade routes opened up specifically for Earth's textile products. Factories that had been closing down were suddenly running 3 shifts to meet galactic demand. Small towns that made specialized fabrics became wealthy overnight. But it was not just about money. Earth had earned something more valuable than wealth. Earth had earned respect from the galactic community. Not the kind of respect that came from having the biggest weapons or the fastest ships, but the respect that came from having solutions to real problems. The respect that came from having knowledge worth sharing. Kate often thought about that moment when the test results had appeared on the displays. The shocked silence in the gallery. The way the aliens had looked at Earth's simple fabric with new understanding. It had been a turning point not just for Earth's trade relationships, but for how the galaxy viewed humanity itself. Humans were no longer seen as the newcomers with nothing to offer. They were seen as the survivors who had learned hard lessons and were willing to share those lessons with others. They were seen as the practical engineers who could solve problems that fancy technology could not. Danny visited Kate at her office one day. He brought coffee, a habit they had maintained from their early days working together. They sat and talked about how much had changed. "You know what I think about most?" Danny said. "That firefighter coat. Helen's coat. It represented something the aliens did not understand at first. It represented generations of humans who died learning what worked and what did not. Every stitch in that coat was paid for with someone's life or injury. That is why it worked so well. It had to." Kate nodded. That is what they needed to understand. Our materials are not just products. They are lessons. Hard lessons learned over thousands of years. When you put on a piece of Earth safety equipment, you are wearing the accumulated wisdom of everyone who came before and figured out how to survive just one more day. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, drinking their coffee and watching the traffic outside. Ships from dozens of worlds passed by, many of them carrying Earth's fabrics and materials to distant stars. "Think we changed the galaxy?" Danny asked with a slight smile. Kate smiled back. "Maybe a little. But more importantly, I think we reminded the galaxy of something it had forgotten. That simple solutions refined over time can be better than complex solutions created in a laboratory. That survival teaches lessons, no simulation, ever can. That sometimes the old ways work because they work, not because they are flashy or impressive. Danny raised his coffee cup to simple cloth that has been through fires that would melt you. Kate raised her cup to meet his, to humanity. May we always remember that our greatest strength is not our technology, but our refusal to give up and our willingness to learn from every mistake. They drank their coffee and watched the ships go by. Out there in the galaxy, on stations and planets and ships across hundreds of light years, people were wearing Earth's materials. They were trusting human engineering to keep them alive in dangerous places. They were learning that sometimes the simplest answer was the right answer. And on Earth, in factories and workshops and laboratories, people were working to make those materials even better. Not by making them more complex or more expensive, but by continuing to refine them, test them, and improve them in the same way humans had always done. Because that was the human way. Find what works, make it better, test it until it cannot fail, then test it some more. Never settle for good enough when lives are at stake. Never stop learning from mistakes. Never forget that every piece of equipment is a promise to the person who uses it, a promise that says we did everything possible to keep you safe. The Valtheon Exposition became famous throughout the galaxy. It was taught in schools as an example of how assumptions could be wrong. It was discussed in engineering classes as proof that elegant simplicity often beats complex sophistication. It was used in diplomatic courses to show how one moment could change relationships between entire civilizations. But for Kate and Danny and Helen and all the other humans who had contributed to that moment, it was simply a reminder. A reminder that Earth had something valuable to offer the galaxy. Not because humans were smarter or stronger or more advanced, but because humans had survived the unsurvivable, learned from it, and were willing to share those lessons with anyone who would listen. Years would pass, decades, centuries. The galaxy would continue to grow and change. New species would join the community. New technologies would be invented. New challenges would arise. But somewhere in all of that change and progress, there would always be a place for Earth's simple cloth. The cloth that had been through fires that would melt you. The cloth that represented human stubbornness, human ingenuity, and human determination to survive no matter what the universe threw at T.